some people worry that if you let HR professionals kind of lead an organization, you may end up overspending on salaries, overspending on benefits, and have really happy employees, but you're going to have an unprofitable business. And so, what's the best way to kind of balance the people in your team, the clients, and profitability?
Mhm. That is $1 million question, isn't it? The way in which that the onboarding process has been automated internally for Humi is something that I know that actually people on my team have shared through webinars and have shared with other folks in the HR community. Because both the experience and our onboarding scores are extremely high for industry standards. And that's
Okay.
something that, the team takes a lot of pride in.
Okay. And I guess we can kind of flip this conversation to the opposite perspective of saying that, some people worry that if you let HR professionals kind of lead an organization, you may end up overspending on salaries, overspending on benefits, and have really happy employees, but you're going to have an unprofitable business. And so, what's the best way to kind of balance the people in your team, the clients, and profitability?
Mm-hmm. That is $1 million question, isn't it? I think that it really starts with, again, the leadership's approach to embracing the function of people, call it human resources, people and culture, people operations, employee experience.
Mm-hmm.
It is easy to become siloed and spend money and work on exciting people programs and really create something that is very employee centric. But again, whether outside of the budget or doesn't align with the way that the business is moving, if leadership is not including HR. You hear all the time,
Right.
HR needs a seat at this table, this proverbial table. Whether you have somebody formally in the seat of HR or not, the reality is you are employing people, you are spending money on salaries and benefits. People have an expectation that they are going to be evaluated, that there's going to be performance and compensation conversations at some point. So I hear often that small businesses can't do, XYZ HR initiative or people program because they don't have somebody that has, the HR hat on.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, when I joined Humi, there were 5 different people wearing that proverbial HR hat.
Oh, okay.
And somebody was in charge of recruiting, another person was in charge of processing compensation and benefits, oftentimes your financial controller. And at the end of the day, ensuring that your people leader or the people on the team who have people responsibilities have insight into where the business is moving, the strategic objectives. They have insight into the performance of the business, truly is the best way to ensure that you are not overspending or spending on the wrong things. Because people programs can not only be costly, but they can take a long time to implement.
Right.
And it also can set expectations with employees that this new thing is coming. And so if all of a sudden all this time and energy is put into this program that then has to be pared back, if the people who have made that decision to pare it back or to make that change don't have insight into, why are we pulling this back other than we don't have money, it's going to be harder for you to retain people, and it's ultimately really going to erode trust. And listen, there has been a pretty significant shift in, I would say, not only the market, but the HR space in the last 8 months, where many businesses who were in this growth stage and this exciting,
It's all great when
endless
you're growing.
opportunity. Exactly. And, really seeing businesses prioritize EDI and prioritize people programs and HR leaders having a true budget for the first time. I wouldn't say that's all been stripped away, but HR programs and initiatives are very much in the spotlight right now
Mm-hmm.
because businesses have that added pressure in order to understand profitability instead of growth. We saw a lot of investment
Right.
in the venture space through
Mm-hmm.
2021 into 2022. A lot of that has changed. So as HR leaders, the shift has happened away from, okay, grow and the sky is the limit, into evaluating what you're actually spending money on and being able to say, here's what it's driving, here's the impact that it's having, and here's
Mm-hmm.
how it's creating engagement and that employee experience that matches where the business is at.
Yeah. And I mean, from my perspective, I'm an accountant, right? So then I just love getting actual metrics on things, right? So like I think for our own firm, and some of the things we suggest to clients often is that once you get those metrics of like actual turnover, you can kind of compare that to industry average, or you can kind of see seniority profiles or headcount history and salary reports and diversity mix, like and even just time it takes to actually fill a position. And then once you have these metrics, you can kind of make decisions based on these metrics, right? Like, but if you
Mm-hmm.
don't actually track that, so if you don't have an HRIS that actually tracks that, it makes it so much harder to make decisions that will ensure profitability or that will
Mm-hmm.
ensure clients are happy. And so that's just from my own kind of experience.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think a very easy trap to fall into when it comes to people metrics
Mm,
is overextending what you're measuring. So, what do I mean by that? I could
yeah.
rhyme off 15 different HR metrics, and I get asked all the time,
Okay.
Andrea, what HR metrics do you measure?
Yeah.
Measuring something, and again, it's easy when you have an HRIS that does this for you. The difference between measuring and having access to the data compared to actually prioritizing, measuring the right things,
Hmm.
um, is pretty significant. And so,
Okay.
as an example, when
Yeah.
Humi was scaling and going from 60 employees to 120 employees between
Hmm.
2021 to 2022,
Hmm.
I was not looking at um, I was not looking at program participation rates, and I was not looking at um, the percentage of people who were going through training before being promoted in the same lens that I was looking at time to hire, the open vacancies,
Right.
the satisfaction ratings for people through the interview process, because we were in a scaling stage.
Hmm.
Compare
That was the
that to,
focus. Yeah.
that was the focus. So yes, you could in theory measure, again, 15 different things
Right.
where the business was at. The recruiting metrics really were at the forefront because of what the business was doing at that time.
Hmm.
And so my advice to any business is, when it comes to HR metrics, is to understand what the business is doing first and choose less metrics at the outset in order to measure, because you need
Right.
to create that benchmark. Otherwise, you're
Hmm.
doing, frankly, busy work.
Hmm. Yeah, and like you can get some false positives on metrics that don't even matter, or whatever, and then it'll be distracting.
And
Um,
in a situation where the company is doubling in size,
mhm.
of course, your satisfaction data is not really going to be authentic until you have a quarter, half a year, or a year with that
Yeah,
stable employee base.
right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.